All right, good morning, everyone. I just started the conference, and I believe that I did that after I'd already started speaking. So I think I've gone through this once already. So let me begin again. Good morning and welcome to everybody joining for day 2 of the SHRUG 2020 virtual workshop. I wanted to thank you all for joining us again today on day 2, and to thank our sponsors real quick. Esri, Tallahassee, Leon County GIS, and Panda Consulting. This morning's session is going to be, pull up my schedule real quick. Wendy, Peloquin, and Michael Parma, and their presentation is Esri's Utility Network, Lessons Learned, and What to Expect. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to them and let them present. So Michael, I'm going to make you the presenter.
All right, I see that. Can y'all see my screen?
Yep.
All right, good deal.
Perfect. So good morning, everyone. I'm Wendy Peloquin, Account Executive at GIS Inc. And today I'm joined by Michael Parma, our Water Solutions Architect, and we're going to be speaking to you briefly on some of the top lessons learned implementing the utility network for water utilities. So at GIS Inc., we know organizations struggle with using geospatial technology. We believe GIS should be simple and accessible to all. We are a team of experts committed to serving our clients with inspired experience that transforms their organization. So we've been strategically aligned with Esri and the ArcGIS platform for nearly 30 years now, and we currently have approximately 130 passionate professionals with one core purpose: solving difficult technology problems that make a difference in the world. So we are regularly early adopters of Esri technology, including the utility network, and we were the first team to earn our specialty designation based on the experience with water. So we take the time to learn, train, and prepare ourselves so that we can pass that knowledge and experience onto your team. So today we're going to talk for a few minutes about the Esri Utility Network Management Framework. We'll cover a few things that you need to know, what you can expect, some required actions, and even a few lessons learned. And we've even updated this morning to fill you in on Esri's newest solution deployment method that they just released yesterday. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Parma to start talking about what you need to know about the utility network.
All right, thank you, Wendy. So good morning, everyone. First, what you need to know. As you may know, Esri released the Utility Network Management Framework into production early last year. This is a framework that we first started hearing about on the water side, probably about 4 years ago. Esri's been working on it for 5 or 6 years now, really leading with the electric and telco spaces, and then now with the water being released again last year. So the UN is really a technology modernization effort meant to bring modern IT best practices to network management. So its primary distinguishing characteristics are its service-oriented architecture, business logic that's embedded within the database rather than in the application itself, and cross-platform support. So being able to access the UN and have similar functionality across all of your devices. It's also meant to simplify and improve our ability to be able to integrate the GIS and specifically your network data with other business systems. This has been an issue for various folks that have been using the geometric network for so many years. Now, the UN brings the capability to model, edit, and analyze complex network systems across the entire ArcGIS platform. Most of the advanced functions of its predecessor, the geometric network, were limited to the desktop environment. And that's not the case with the UN. One of the things where this becomes readily apparent is that for those of you who are using geometric networks, you're familiar with having the attribute assistant add-in. that needed to be installed with your in your ArcMap application. And that had to be, the configuration file had to be sitting there as well and accessible to all the users. And folks that had mobile applications, perhaps going out and GPSing hydrants, one of the common workflows we saw there was that people would go and GPS the hydrant, but they didn't have access to the tools to be able to assign an ID for each of those hydrants. So what would happen is then, people would bring their data back into the office, and somebody would, unload the data and then use the attribute assistant tools there within ArcMap to go back and assign those IDs. With the utility network, all that business logic and those, they're called field expressions now, are embedded within the database itself. So when I go and collect a feature with something like collector, those triggers or those field expressions, sorry, are kicked off, and I can actually assign a new ID from directly in the field. I no longer will need to come back into the office and run a second step. So I'll have live IDs. So that's a big improvement with the ability to edit and have those functions within the mobile apps as well. From an analyzing perspective, a lot of people may not realize that, from a tracing perspective, that with the geometric network, we had the tools in in ArcMap to be able to do traces. And then we also had that capability in the web, in recent years. However, those were actually two completely different code bases, one for desktop, right, and one for the web. And you didn't always get the same results, even if you would trace from the same location. It was subtle, but with the utility network, all that tracing business logic, it actually happens within the database itself. And so you can count on the fact that when you do a trace, whether you do it in Pro or you do it out in the field, you're going to get the same results. The trace happens within the database itself and in server. The UN also introduces a high fidelity data model, allowing more granular and more accurate capture of both linear and vertical assets. So these can be captured, these can be captured using containment and associations, which allow for advanced tracing while also not cluttering the map in very dense areas. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, but we're now seeing that features that you collect, say a pump, that previously this was just a single point on a line, right? You could drop a pump really anywhere. With the UN, there are rules for where you can drop a pump, and in fact, you actually then have to configure when you drop it on a main or the pipe, what is the low pressure intake side and what's the high pressure output side. So you have a lot more granular options here with your data. So while the geometric network has served us all well for 20 years, the UN is really expected to provide the technological foundation for the next 2 years or the next 2 decades. Sorry. So think about that. When the GN came out in the late 90s, there was no such thing as a smartphone. Now they're everywhere, and field crews are expecting to be able to access their data and advanced functionality from whatever device they have. The UN provides that. So the full enterprise version of the UN requires components of ArcGIS Enterprise. So server, portal, ArcGIS Pro, a relational database such as Oracle or SQL, and Postgres to really provide that multi-user environment. Beginning at 10.8.1, licensing is now managed through portal user type extensions. Prior to 10.8.1, this was actually an extension to ArcGIS Server. Now it's a user type extension that's enabled within Portal. We really highly recommend deploying on the latest version of Esri available at the time that you start your implementation. Really, that's because this is one of those applications that's being developed rapidly, and every version of the software is introducing new capabilities. A couple things you'll need to know as far as your enterprise. There is of course, it uses all the components of enterprise, and as well it has a new concept of branch versioning. So all of us are probably familiar with a multi-user environment and a traditional version environment. You've got these A and D tables and whatnot. The branch versioning is a totally new type of versioning structure within the database, and it's really all managed by a single flat table. It's nothing that you'll need to worry about the data structure itself as a user, but it does mean that you will need a separate database instance for the UN. Of course, everybody's going to localize the schema. Esri is providing these base asset packages for all the different utilities, but we are expecting, just like with the geometric network and Esri's model, that people are going to localize it for their specific business needs. Really, the ArcGIS Enterprise, we really see this being, especially that base asset package, being used by mid to large size utilities. Now, actually, yes, just as of yesterday, Esri released what they're now calling the Water Distribution Data Management for ArcGIS Enterprise. Basically, previous to this, they've had a water distribution foundation that you could deploy to ArcGIS Online. And that was actually deployed as a tool, part of the ArcGIS Pro solution deployment tool. Now there's actually a notebook that Esri is releasing with this water distribution data management, both for ArcGIS and ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online, where you can use this notebook task to help you deploy the entire solution, including the data schema, and in case of Enterprise, they'll even deploy sample data for you, so you've got a fully functioning UN within your environment. So this is new capabilities to be able to do this through these tasks. It simplifies the way that you can get this up and running pretty quickly. With this, really, we see this being good particularly for small organizations. You don't have a very complicated environment. It can be deployed to ArcGIS Online, so you don't need all the enterprise. However, with ArcGIS Online, that particular deployment, you have simple features only, meaning that you're using the database schema of the UN, but not the entire UN capability. Okay, so specifically things like tracing are not enabled there because that's handled actually as a geoprocessing service. It'll be the simple features, but what that means is that you can go ahead and collect your data and prepare for, particularly being able to prepare for a larger implementation. Okay. And as well, there's also, as released recently at the last release, there's now an option for just a file geodatabase. So this is for a single user environment. You can't publish services off of it, but again, it's a great option for being able to prototype or jumpstart your UN implementation by having a single user in Pro using the file geodatabase that has all capabilities, does not require any licensing, and you can run the full UN. Just know that it's meant for a single user. And again, like I said, really for prototyping, for larger organizations, this would be a good option, or for a jumpstart to really kind of get you going with the UN. Now, what can you expect from the utility network? Modern workflows require mobility. So common devices like smartphones, today weren't around when the geometric network came to be. There's been increasing demand for being able to access my network regardless of where I am. So it could be out in the field, literally around the city, working with the linear assets, but also I need to be inside the fence, so in the yard or even inside the plant. The UN is designed to be able to handle that and enable everybody to access the same data and even manage the data, again, based on security permissions, but anybody should be able to access the UN, manage the data regardless of where they are. The UN is designed to support network functionality across the entire Esri platform. So whether that be desktop, web, or native apps, truly any device, anywhere, anytime. We mentioned that as well with the field mobility and our smartphones. So this carries forward, where I won't have a certain functionality within ArcGIS Desktop and another set of functionality on a web application. You will have that functionality across the entire platform. Now, this is all enabled through services-oriented architecture, ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Enterprise, feature services, and geoprocessing services. So for those of y'all who are using your GNs right now, your geometric networks right now, again, you're used to connecting directly to the database through ArcMap. And then obviously through a web server or map services through the web applications. However, once your utility network is in the database and published, everything happens through, all interaction is through those feature services. Okay, this is the manner in which we get that any device, anytime, anywhere, because all the business logic, the application logic is really happening within the database and in services. So instead of me making a direct edit on the database, I'm submitting an edit to a feature service, and then the server actually handles that. Okay, so making a REST endpoint call, it's the same regardless of what device I'm using. So that's also the features, or the services-oriented architecture is also what enables integrations with other systems, so that I'm not having to connect directly to the database between these various systems, but I can go through the services. And so in the extreme example, then I could take my backend Oracle database and switch to SQL, and I would not have to rewrite database triggers, etc. All that because I'm going through the REST services. The client application is unaware. A high fidelity data model allows for more granular and accurate real world representations of the assets. So with explicit connectivity rules, asset directionality, terminals, containment and associations, managers and operators can expect data to function like its physical counterpart during analysis. I mentioned earlier pumps. We also have things like pressure release valves, backflow preventers. Again, previously, or all these are one-way devices. Previously, they were just a point on the line in our geometric network. Now, these actually have directionality. And so a backflow preventer will not, if I do a trace, it's not going to allow me to go past that device unless I'm going in the correct direction. And there's also these explicit connectivity rules, meaning that in order to connect two different devices, I actually have to have a rule in place that says those devices can connect. I have a client that, just for ease of use in the geometric network, they used to place a fire hydrant right at the end of a main. Okay, it was just easy for them to edit, and the GM would allow them to do it. In the utility network, it really functions and models what is actually happening out in the field, which means I need the main and then a reducer and then a hydrant, lateral and a valve. All of those assets, those features need to be there, and the rules are in place to ensure that that type of connectivity is there. As well, I can even say that I can apply or attach a 2-inch lateral to an 8-inch main, and I have to do that through a certain type of fitting. Those rules are there. The idea here is really to prevent you from making bad data, right? So with those rules, Esri is trying to make it hard for users to make bad data. You want to be able to trust your data. With business logic in the database, those configurable levels of tracing, and now 3D support for vertical assets, this is the next generation of network management. Now, the UN is designed to be flexible for today's modern IT practices. And we've seen this in a couple recent examples. One of our clients had a locally accessed VDI. So that's their virtual desktop, which was unable to support ArcGIS Pro. And the cost of updating their VDI was just prohibitive. And specifically, that's because of the graphics card. And they were going to have to do that across the organization, but only for a couple users. It was just cost prohibitive. So a virtualized environment located in a completely different state hosted the UN database and the feature services. We then configured Amazon AppStream, which does support ArcGIS Pro, allowing our client to run Pro through that thin desktop streaming service to connect to the remote UN. So all locations were in separate states and they still performed well together. Now, the GIS manager for one of our other clients has generally worked remotely from home using VPN to get to a jump box that was located back in the office. Now, when COVID hit, everybody moved home and his jump box was now his primary machine and it was located at the house. So with everybody in the organization working remotely from home, their VPN tunnel quickly became saturated. And we all know putting GIS data through a VPN is troublesome at best. And so he really didn't want to add on to that saturated tunnel. So just in a matter of minutes, he was able to reconfigure his ArcGIS Pro project, connect directly to his secure but publicly accessible UN feature services, and continue his editing uninterrupted while not further impacting that VPN traffic. Now, finally, what do you need to do? Now, this is a possible implementation approach. There isn't a set in stone way to do this. This is just what we have found works when trying to prepare a client for getting into the utility network. Some steps will overlap or iterate. The first is really performing readiness assessments to lay out the roadmap. So this is your technical assessments of your ArcGIS environment or your servers, making sure that your servers, your network are all ready in place. And as well, really the data assessment. So making sure that your data is ready, and particularly things like connectivity. You want to make sure that your features are already connected before you do the data migration. As well, if there are missing attributes, you'll want to try to take care of those within the source data. So really what you want to do here is just assess your data, figure out how many features need to be updated, and then the next step is going to be really cleaning your data, right? So that really could take various lengths of time depending on the size of your organization, how clean your data is, and whatnot. Finally, after that, you've built your roadmap. The next thing is to implement the technical platform. You'll start with a dedicated development environment, setting that up. At the end of the project, you'll update your production environment, but here you're implementing your development environment, preparing Portal, ArcGIS Enterprise, etc. And then you'll start your migration planning. So this is really where you're mapping your source data into the utility network. So where presently with your water, say your water distribution system, most people have, about 12 to 15 feature classes. In the utility network, there is always 5 feature classes, no more, no less. So, You've got to migrate, plan on how you're going to migrate the data, build the integration tools or the migration tools. Esri does provide some data loading tools for you, basically an FME workbench, and there are other tools out there as well, and we'll talk briefly about that. Finally, planning your integrations with other business systems. You'll have things, certain asset management systems are built to read your GIS data directly, meaning they're either going into services or directly into the database on your GN. So obviously you'll need to update, plan for how you're going to update how those systems are going to read your data. You've also got other systems, billing systems, SCADA, hydraulic modeling that, are really indirectly reading your database. Often you're exporting your database and then it gets imported into those systems. So again, those will need to be updated as well. And that's really part of your integration planning. Finally, with all that, you're going to implement your plan. And probably one of the biggest things here is educating your users on the new platform, right? So getting into ArcGIS Pro. Really, Pro has been out for 5 years. So, when we talk about ArcGIS Desktop at this point, when Esri says desktop, they're really talking Pro. And they consider ArcMap to be secondary just for those users who are really managing geometric networks. So get your users on Pro and then, make sure you've got that training. So this is how most people's water systems look, presently. You've got a geometric network and you've got these various applications that are coming in and reading that database. So, everybody's here and your editors are working directly in that. One of the things that one of our partners, SSP Innovations, has a tool, SSP Sync, that really we like to use with our most of our systems as we cut over, because it's really a risk mitigation system in that it extends the runway in that you can bring over applications one at a time. So effectively what it does is keep your geometric network as your production environment and set up the UN as a publication environment, and it synchronizes the two. What that allows you to do then is allow your users to continue editing in the GN while you then bring over all your web applications and other business applications to read the UN. And then finally at the end, what you do is once all those systems are reading the UN, all your users are there, your editors really are the last people to come over and start editing directly on the UN. And then you retire sync. So that's really one of the, for those of you who have extensive integrations with other business systems, really this is a way to extend that runway, reduce your risk, rather than trying to cut over all the systems at one time. So finally, what have we learned? First of all, with Pro, you really need to know the complete enterprise stack. Okay. Again, with before it was ArcMap and the database. Now you're going through services. So really, when you're troubleshooting, it could be in any part of the enterprise. With those services, with the database, the utility network configuration itself for the network. Really, you're going to want to architect your system for performance. This is heavy on feature services. All of your editing goes through these services. All the analysis and connectivity goes through geoprocessing services. This is one technology that we are recommending that when you implement, implement on the latest version. Often organizations like to hang back a version or two with the UN because of the continued development, across all the utility network domains. Really, we highly suggest getting on the latest version when you implement. So right now that would be at 10.8.1. Also, once you do deploy a UN, you need to account for that as part of your GIS upgrades. There is a lot of version dependencies between ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Enterprise, the utility network, and the specific data model, utility network data model that you're using. So there's 4 different kind of versions that need to play nicely together here. If you don't take that into account when you upgrade your GIS environment, you will very likely break your UN. Again, that nuanced version compatibility, you need to take that into account when you start doing upgrades. So if you implement the UN at 10.7.1, there are specific steps you'll need to take in order to upgrade to 10.8.1. You know, Esri, if you've been to any of the, the water conference or Esri UC, been paying attention to this. I mean, Esri is pouring, a lot of effort into the UN and increasing capabilities. Again, this is designed to be that platform for the next 20 years. So we will continue to see that. We'll say there's a lack of documentation and communication. Things are coming out, and it's hard to find information at times. So Esri's aware of that and isn't trying to improve. But they're also rapidly introducing new capabilities, and so it's hard to keep the documentation up to date. You'll likely stub your toe, as you're going through the UN implementation. But do know that Esri technical support has been greatly improving. We had the honor of about 2 years ago, creating the first Esri UN ticket. And yeah, I mean, frankly, it didn't go well. But over the past 2 years now, really Esri's putting really good people on the UN on that support tickets. And in fact, we're in conversations with Esri all the time as a platinum partner, but they are really paying attention to those technical support tickets. That is what's driving additional development or bug fixes, etc. is really through those trouble tickets. So if you're implementing the UN, they are encouraging you to create those tickets. Trust me, you're not going to be a nuisance. They want that information. That is the official communication channel, is those tickets. Also, the base packages that Esri puts out, that's really the Cadillac. They're trying to design everything for everybody. That's the fully loaded version of the asset package, if you will. We do see opportunities to provide a more trimmed down version of the UN, and we're actually working on some of that. So really, in summary, remember that Esri is updating the network management to meet current and future IT best practices. The UN is redesigned to take advantage of that modern IT infrastructure to work across all platforms and devices, allowing workflows to move out into the field and improving real-world representations of your network assets. It really is the future of network management. And finally, you'll need to first build your roadmap, plan your content migration, implement the technical backbone, reconfigure your system integrations, and perhaps most importantly, prepare your users. So on behalf of Wendy and myself and the rest of our team here at GIS Inc., we really appreciate your time and attention this morning. And please feel free to contact either one of us to get started with your UN implementation. So thank you much. And now we'll take a few minutes for your questions.
All right, everyone. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Michael. If you have questions, please go ahead and type them into the questions block in the GoToWebinar control panel. We do have about 10 minutes for questions. Okay. So our first question is, will the presentation be distributed to attendees later? Sam, we currently have the plan to record all of our sessions and host them on our website later on through, I believe, YouTube. So be on the lookout for an announcement on the SHRUG website for a link to the YouTube channel where these presentations will be held.
Yep, and we also have a similar presentation available on our website at GIS Inc. So if you wanted to send me an email, I can send you a link to that as well if you'd like to view it right away or sooner. Okay, are there any other questions?
Currently, no. We're waiting on them to come in. Remember, if you have a question, all you have to do is type it into the questions block on the GoToWebinar control panel. And just give it another minute or two. All right, Michael and Wendy, thank you very much for presenting today. It doesn't seem like we have any more questions, so I don't want to keep everybody on the line. Our next session will begin at 10:45. We have 3 concurrent sessions, so please take a look at the scheduling matrix to take a look at what sessions those are going to be, and the links to the GoToWebinars will be in there. Again, thank you to our sponsors, Esri, Tallahassee, Leon County GIS, and Panda Consulting for supporting us during this 2020 SHRUG Workshop, virtual.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank
Y'all
you.
have a great day.